Oh, hello. I'm Anthony Daniels, and this is every version of C-3PO from the Star Wars movies.
Plans? What are you talking about? I'm not getting in bed. I'm going to regret this.
You know, I am famous for having turned down the opportunity to be in Star Wars. Back in 1975, I hadn't wanted to meet a director called George Lucas, but I did. But I wasn't interested in his sci-fi movie until I saw Ralph McQuarrie's conceptual artwork of the character. He had created this android figure that was standing looking out of the frame towards me, and it really connected. I fell in love with it. I slightly think 3PO fell in love with me, but I'm not sure.
Did you hear that? They shut down the main reactor. We'll be destroyed for sure. This is madness.
The concept of the character was actually based on a film from way back in time, METROPOLIS by Fritz Lang. And in that film, the powers that be created a fake human to try and encourage the workers to behave. And George and Ralph McQuarrie create something similar. The similarity would be that neither of us, the original actor or myself, could actually move in these costumes very well. When I read the script, I really liked C-3PO. So I was very, very happy to go the next day to Elstree Studios in North London and be cast for the part. And I don't mean did I get the part, no, I mean that I was actually covered in plaster to make a mold of my body that would be the frame to make the actual robot suit. Well, I have to tell you that being cast in plaster is not something I would recommend, especially the bit where they shove straws up your nose so that they can model your head. Eventually, there in the studio was my figure in white plaster with very little clothing on. It wasn't a pretty sight. But then came along Liz Moore, the sculptor. Over the next few weeks, Liz began to cover my white body with grey modelling clay. And she built up the shape that you eventually see in the finished figure. All these little lines and curlicues and shapes were a reference to that Fritz Lang movie. I'd be in the studio most days, and they would try out a new piece on me. It might be an arm or a leg or a neck or a head or something. And sometimes they were paper prototypes, sometimes they were made of plastic, thin plastic. The most interesting thing for me was when it came to 3PO's face. I remember coming into a room and there were, I think, 6 heads on a kind of high table. And actually they were all terrific in their grey clay. There was this one. And I said, George, the only one I don't like is this one at the end. He said, oh, that's the one we're using. In my defense, he didn't look anything like he turned out, because when he turned out in gold, I felt 3PO was beautiful. There's no way 3PO can ever exist without a whole team, and that was right from the beginning. First of all, of course, George Lucas, who thought up the idea, Norman Reynolds, and then down to Phil McDonald, Maxie, my dresser, who was not from the wardrobe department, but from props, because basically I was a prop. Maxie and his fellow workers would join in the team because I needed more than Maxie, it turned out. It was way more complicated a costume than anybody thought. And so on that first day, I think there were 6 people coming in from all angles to dress me up in it. And I really rely, and have always relied, on the kindness of the crew and the people who really care about making me as comfortable as was possible, which wasn't that much. But gradually they built up the team under Norman Reynolds, who worked with the plasters department and the plastics department, all these clever prop makers. And they came up eventually with all the bits and pieces to make a robot. And I tried it on in the special effects studio at Elstree. And for the first time, I had that suit in its entirety around me. It was horrible. I had completely lost connectivity with my body the world. I literally blundered around the studio because I couldn't really see apart from the eyes in the center, and I had no idea what my elbows were doing, which were way bigger than my elbows. My shoulders were bigger. My legs were kind of trapped. After about 15 minutes, we took it off. Whew, what a relief. I never saw it again until a month later. They're out in a tent in the desert, and there were all the pieces, 17 pieces, I think, laid out. And gradually, over a 2-hour period, they covered me in this gold. We started off with lactites and a black leotard and a black hood. The next bit would be, slightly more sensitive area, the front and the back. And these were 2 pieces of very thin plastic that had been vacuum formed. And they put these around me and over the corset thing. Then they took gold tape and stuck that down the side. So now the 2 parts, front and back, had become one. Next, really complicated, there was the top half of the leg that was attached to the bottom half, the calf, with a sort of, literally a bungee cord either side that stretched down between 2 nodules. This allowed the piece to work like that, to keep them locked together, with the knee, which had these kind of interlocking fragments like that. They came down, and to get that on, Maxie, my dresser, and the team turned it the wrong way. I put my foot through it all the way down, and then when it was in there, they turned it round and pinned the back on. So now my leg was locked in there. Before that, they put on my deck shoe, a deck shoe being a little rubber-soled canvas thing with a kind of white rubber around there, a nice blue canvas top, sort of thing you'd wear if you were out sailing. But here we weren't. This was merely the undershoe, because the top of 3PO's foot was all the foot there was. It was just a foot, bang. A gold cover that looked beautiful, again made out of very thin plastic. And then we came up to the top section, the front and the back. I was locked in there. I wasn't going anywhere without the suit. Then an arm came up. I had black cotton gloves on as well. And then a hand, and these were strange pieces of just knuckles and joints and things glued onto black cotton gloves. Maxie had glued them on the night before. The glue had set before we could take them off, and basically we had to wrench them off my hands for me to go to sleep that night. We had 2 necks. One was split down the back and pinned together, and that was for the camera to shoot from the front. The other one was for the camera to shoot from the back, and that had a split down the front. I know, stay with me. I think we'd been 2 hours doing this, hour and a half at least. Then came the final torture, which was to take the face and the back, almost like an Easter egg, cut in half, right? Put them together like that. And here's the clever bit. Well, it seemed a good idea at the time. They took the kind of earring thing here, and they pointed it through the hole in the side of the face, which joined to the hole in the back of the head, and then poked it through into a bayonet fitting, like a light bulb, old-fashioned light bulb, in the neck. Trouble was that this was quite hard on the day, because you had to line up these holes and the pin and push against something that pushed away when you pushed it. After half an hour, I'm not exaggerating, they finally locked these pins into shape. And at which point the same bayonet type fitting, but far easier, just 2 pieces. So we had the whole 3PO look. And that first day, when I walked out into the desert, nobody had ever seen that shape, that figure before. And through the little pinhole eyes, I could scan all the people in front of me, the crew, who were standing as the morning sun rose up over the desert. And their reaction was extraordinary. They were variously either very charmed or completely crazy. They just, wow, look at that sort of thing. And finally, 3PO was complete, apart from one thing, that Maxie put his hand up behind 3PO's back, and under that little back plate, there's a tiny switch. That connected the 6 batteries within that little box to a wire that came over inside my head that had been joined to another wire which was connected to the eyes. So we had a full circuit from those little eyes, and so with a flick of a switch, suddenly 3PO had become alive for the very first time. My friend C-3PO, of course, looks fantastic, but there was one thing that, at that point, was missing, because one of 3PO's attributes, he loves to talk. He's a translator, fluent in over 6 million forms of communication. How was this going to happen? I'd had 6 months to think. I don't know.
I'm only a droid and not very knowledgeable about such things.
So here was day one, and I still didn't know what was going to happen. What was I going to do? I was there in the desert. I was hurting. I was pained. I had learnt the words, sort of. I'd never been in a film. So the word action was terrifying, quite terrifying. But at that moment, something came to my aid, some kind of movie magic, some kind of force, whatever, because at that moment, that precise moment, 3PO came alive. Why, sir, my first job was programming binary load lifters.
Very similar to your evaporators in most respects.
Can you speak Bocce?
Of course I can, sir. It's like a second language to me. I'm as
All right,
fluent in...
shut up.
Yeah,
I'll
I
take
could say it now. I couldn't say it on the day. I think that my nervousness, my discombobulation of everything made me flub the lines like crazy. Third time I got it wrong, George kind of frowned and walked over and stared 3PO in the eye, and therefore me in the eye. You can say anything you like, don't worry about the voice. I can fix it later. I was embarrassed because as an actor I like to get the lines right. So then I carried on, and in that case, on the 4th take, I said, "Why, sir, my first job was to cut." Of course, George knew that he could put in a proper voice later, because when your head is inside a bucket, you don't sound so good. That sounded because you couldn't possibly use that kind of vocal quality, even though the microphone was here, and a little microphone cable was going all the way down my back into my pants. Those 2 bits of plastic stuck together, and the transmitter was shoved somewhere really quite warm. Yes, I was speaking to you all the time out of my butt.
But it's supposed to be freezing. How are we going to dry out all the clothes? I really don't know. Go switch off.
The huge success of A New Hope meant that suddenly we were making a second film, The Empire Strikes Back, number 5. I know the math has always confused me a bit. But 3PO was back there again. And now people had had a chance to kind of study the costume a little more. Some things were changed to make things easier. For The Empire Strikes Back, the costume was basically the same. And some of the improvements maybe saved time, but it was still a struggle to be C-3PO. The shoes were one piece. They were no longer the deck shoes with the cover. They were opened at the back and my foot went in, and then, believe it or not, again with the gold tape, they were taped up or tied sometimes with shoelaces. One thing I want to remind you of, back in the day in episode 4, 3PO didn't have 2 gold legs. He had 1 silver shin. A lot of people didn't notice it. And the reason is it was kind of subtle, and the silver actually reflected the gold of the other leg. And also in the desert, it reflected the gold of the sand. To such an extent that John Jay, the beloved stills photographer, and he'd been shooting stills all through the shoot. On the last day in the desert, he came up to me and said, "Townes, why are you wearing a silver leg today?" And I thought, oh, a blind cameraman, who knew?
I've got to rest before I fall apart. My joints are almost frozen.
And people still argue, does 3PO have a silver leg? The point of the silver shin that would come to haunt me many years later in The Force Awakens was to say that 3PO had had a bit of a history, that he'd had some kind of drama before this, you know. But it was so subtle that hardly anybody noticed. But 3PO was there and still fairly mobile. I had, in fact, been tap dancing on the Muppet Show just a few months before. But again, I was younger.
Yo, you're next!
I certainly don't dance.
No, but this is our big ending!
Oh, all right.
For The Empire Strikes Back, I also had, well, 3PO had new hands. They still didn't work, but they were new. And they were one-piece plastic. Very much looked like the originals, but had been made on a new mold and split open under here, and I would wiggle my hand in, wearing a black glove to, wearing plastic on your skin is not nice, so the glove was still essential, just as a cover me on the inside. So now I had these beautiful plastic gloves that were this shape, and whatever I did, they remained this shape. It was like Curse of the Plastic Hands.
I can do, and my joints are freezing up.
Eventually, they would soften with body heat and so on, so that I could, with pressure, bend them like this. If I wanted to point over there, I would, by the side of my body, curl these fingers around, hold them against my body with my finger extended, and then at the last minute on cue go, oh, look! If I'd stay there much longer, They were not great. Again, the wrong materials or different. Everyone was trying. This is not a criticism, it's a list of facts, okay?
Curse my metal body, I wasn't fast enough, it's all my fault.
The pants section, as we'll call them, those two originally were in two pieces. The second film, these were one piece. And we made a little casting of this part of my body. By now I was inured to the humiliation of things actors have to go through to keep apart, So they made this kind of little mini section statue of me and then cast that in a kind of heavier rubbery plastic, which meant that it was one piece, so you couldn't just strap it around me. I had to wiggle into it, and again, a rather kind of undignified wiggling motion. If you study C-3PO close up, freeze frame, and look at various parts of his body, there are wear marks. He's a machine, I guess you get that anyway. But if you look here, you'll see that within moments, the gold finish, because it was a paint, you see there are score marks here where the paint is totally gone. Absolutely not, it's grey metal, it's aluminum. Here, this is difficult for the team because they need to find a gold finish that would attach to plastic, which was semi-mobile. So again, you'll see all sorts of flaking. But the overall effect, as the movie sweeps by, you don't see all this stuff. You don't want to see it. You're not looking for that. You're looking for the whole story of the gold character that's going on these adventures with his friends. There were a lot of fun things in The Empire Strikes Back. But the scary thing, and the fun thing, was reading on the page 3PO in Cloud City. Something's going on in this side hall here, so he goes in and you hear him say, pardon me, no, don't get up, don't. I was out of a job. I scurried through the next few pages. He wasn't dead yet. He wasn't finished. Chewbacca went and found bits of 3PO as they headed towards the fiery furnace of Meltdown, one of his great dreads. Chewbacca was there to drag him and put him in his bits in a net. And so now 3PO's performance, my performance, was in pieces, literally in pieces.
Get us off! Yes, stop, please, I'm not ready to die!
Peter Mayhew, who was Chewbacca at the time, had a bag of bits. And I've got to tell you that if you look carefully, some fan has just discovered there's an arm and a leg and another bit and a this and a that. In fact, there are two arms, both right arms. Props got it wrong. I love it. Because I had all sorts of spare bits and they just chucked bits in there and didn't notice that they had two right arms.
And you all alone. Had to be a mistake.
You've got to forgive them. And the clever thing there was, Chewbacca, Peter Mayhew, he had a blaster. And on this end was a piece of fishing wire attached through the costume to this. So when he did that, my head on the back was being animated by fishing wire. So it kept the whole thing alive.
Artu, where have you been? Wait, turn round, bully! Hurry, we're trying to save Han from the bounty hunter. Well, at least you're still in one piece.
The more fun was when he put my head on backwards.
What have you done? I'm backwards, you sleeping...
The only way to do it was to take a 3PO head, cut out the back of the head. So his face was here looking that way. My face was sticking out of the back, which from the side is a bit difficult because this bit's longer, especially this bit. So this bit kept peeking out at the side. So they stuck gold tape on it. And I promise you, if you freeze frame in that bit on Chewbacca's knee, you will see for a moment a kind of thing here, and that is my nose.
Something's not right.
Not everything is perfect in Star Wars. Not everything is photoshopped out. There's little moments. But then there were other moments that I would be on the floor with my arm up through the 3PO chest into the face so that I could animate it a bit like an old ventriloquist puppet as I spoke the lines, so I could animate as I spoke. And when you put them together, the audience believes it's one phenomenon. The scariest bit for me was when 3PO is standing in the middle of the Falcon corridor and he's holding a limb.
You haven't finished with me yet. You don't know how to fix the hyperdrive. Chewbacca can do it.
Down there, the leg is missing. Now, these days, you do it with green screen technology or just clever computer stuff. Then, no, it was me standing on one leg with my other leg curled up behind me, so in line with the camera so you couldn't see it, and holding this, and balancing, and speaking, and shouting, "I'm standing here in pieces, and you have delusions of grandeur." I managed not to fall over, but it was kind of scary because falling in that costume is not good. So a sitting down moment was even more fun because there's a point later on where 3PO is sitting on a box and R2's there and he's got a foot and a welding torch, and he, in my book, he was saying, and I'm saying, where do you think it goes? But 3PO's legs are sticking straight pretty much out towards camera. So how did we do that? How did we have me sitting footless on a box discussing how to attach my foot? Yeah, you're right. I wasn't sitting on the box. I was kneeling on the floor through the box with my feet coming out of the side. Magic.
We're going to execute Master Luke, and if we're not careful, us too.
I wish I had your confidence.
Pretty much it is me always in the 3PO suit, although young Jim was the one who actually fell off the cliff when the sand person attacked Luke Skywalker in episode 4. Jim was a member of the props department. Apparently he was dispensable, because if I'd hurt myself, filming would have come to a halt for a while, whereas Jim, wearing bits of my costume, nobody cared. Bang. I could have done it. It was easy, just out of camera onto a mattress. A bigger stunt was in Return of the Jedi. There we are on Jabba's barge, and by now 3PO's eye is hanging out. Salacious Crumb has pulled it there, and I am edging towards the top of the handrail. The handrail was missing on Jabba's barge, and I'm blindly, I'm now seeing one-eyed with restricted vision. Think about it. And I'm about 60 feet up. And as we get to the rail, I say, cut, because I had stood as though I was going to fall over. And R2 is behind me. The motorized R2 is like nudging me forward. That's part of the film. So we get to my fall position, cut, and then I relax. And then Tracy Emin, stunt person, came in, and she was wearing a rubber suit. Heaven knows what it felt like. And she stood there, and I showed her my hand position, and she took it. She stood there and they said, action, and she went forward, and when you watch, she twists round in the air and falls out of shot. A few feet below, mattresses, and underneath the mattresses are piles of cardboard boxes. And what they do is absorb the shock, a bit like the front of your car. And she was absolutely fine. Of course, she's a pro. She was wonderful. Here's the thing you don't know, maybe. A couple of hours later, she was back up on deck. She'd taken off the rubber suit. She was no longer 3PO. She was Princess Leia, and she is the one who sweeps across to the barge over there, to the skiff. Wonderful, skilled woman.
Did I hear someone mention my name?
Gil, this is really him.
Well, it's a real pleasure to meet you. I've seen all your movies.
Of course, not all Star Wars is in the movies, right? Some of the most amazing spin-offs have been a great joy to me. And the chief one, Star Tours.
Now, in a kingdom very, very near, R2, do hurry. The passengers are boarding.
Now open at Disneyland.
Now, if you haven't ever ridden Star Tours at one of the Disney parks, I suggest you stop watching this video and go right now, because it is a superb rendition of the story in a way that involves you. 3PO is there to welcome you in the spaceport at Disney.
3PO looks real busy.
We better not bother him.
He's there with R2. R2's repairing the ship, and of course getting it totally wrong. And it nearly blows up, and it's all very exciting. But to do this, they needed an animatronic C-3PO. So Tom Fitzgerald, the producer, the head of the design team at Imagineers at Disney, he got me into his studio and said, well, he told me the whole story, and I was sold from the moment I heard it. And then he said, and our idea is for you to come in this little mock-up set and stand just in your jeans and a shirt and play the scene, C-3PO. It was kind of funny. We had a camera, and I had a sandbag over 1 foot. And when I asked why, he said, well, that's where all the engineering for the animatronics comes up into the frame that is C-3PO and animates his actions. So we need you, if you wouldn't mind, to keep still on that leg. And we filmed the scene. They recorded my voice and my action. So R2, test the ion cannons. And here I had a console, and I was poking buttons, and R2 was helping things blow up. And they were using this as a guide. He also asked me to look at the audience who were coming in, the passengers who were coming down the spaceport, around. And they would be at this point about, I don't know, 6 feet, 8 feet below me, looking up as they went by. I turned from the console and looked at people, and then carried on what I was doing. And of course, the inevitable happened. When I stood there alone in the spaceport before we opened, whilst we were rehearsing stuff, I stood looking up at 3PO, thinking just how brilliant Disney had been in making a real robot out of a fake robot. And at that point, as I was kind of admiring, he turned and looked straight at me. I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Where is Master Anakin?
Many years had passed after Return of the Jedi, and I actually thought, Star Wars was never going to happen again. I'd got on with life. It was okay. And then a phone call. Would I go and meet George Lucas at Leavesden Studios in North London? Yeah, of course. And we had a meeting about this new film, and he said, you're created by Anakin. You're built by Anakin. He's a kid.
Come on, I'll show you 3PO.
And I just thought that was brilliant, to have the sweetest character pretty much in the universe, to be made by one of the archest villains ever. So that was cool. How it was achieved was a puppet. And the puppet was built at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, by Michael Lynch, one of the prop makers and designers. R2-D2 so beautifully put it.
What do you mean?
Naked. My parts are showing. Oh, my. It was exquisite. It was totally believable as the insides of this. And they didn't actually offer me the option of puppeteering it. Michael knew how it worked, and kind of it was his thing. I got to say I was disappointed. I would have liked to have had a go. So basically, I was there as the voice, often trying to match movements that weren't particularly mine. But as George said, it's just been made by a kid. What do you expect? Well, fair point. But it was a total different dynamic, physical dynamic. I accepted it, by no choice. And I was fascinated by the puppet, which was really heavy, although they tried to take out as much heavy material, but it still weighed not a ton, but intellectually a ton. And of course, was extremely realistic. You could totally believe this was the inside. So there we had the first film, and obviously if you're making prequel, you're making number 2 prequel. And at this point I said, well, I'd feel better if you'd let me try and puppeteer it, because kind of it's my head, my brain, my thought process. Be careful what you wish for. There I was with Don Bees, my new team head leader, and Justin Dix, who would come back into the story, dressing up as Puppet 3PO. Now, there's a Japanese art form, theatrical art form called bunraku, where you have the most beautiful puppets, and they are animated by performers who are dressed in black, and you, the audience, accept they're not there. It's fine. It's called suspension of disbelief. And so this creature was attached to my feet, so his heels were attached to my toes, his knees to my knees, his waist to my waist, etc. And the arms were on the end of sticks at his elbow so that I could animate to some extent where he was touching things. The head attached to my head to a helmet like that. The only trouble was, of course, that his face was in front of my face, so I couldn't see. I had to guess who I was looking at. Another challenge. The whole thing pretty much rested on a heavy harness, like a Steadicam harness that can take a lot of weight and distribute it around your frame. And I rehearsed for days in Creature's shop at Australia, and could walk pretty well in it and all that kind of thing. And I was absolutely ready for my first shot, having the most touching conversation with Padme Amidala, who, in the middle of the night, because she couldn't sleep, was talking calmly and kindly with 3PO and asking him if he was happy there. And he said, well, I'm not unhappy, the people are lovely, but being like this, like what? Naked, if you'll pardon the expression, it wasn't easy for him. And in this scene, you suddenly had the inner mind of this beloved droid who'd suffered for 18 years for his nakedness. And of course, she, being Padme, being very clever, said, but there's a box of coverings right here. Why, I never noticed. Truly one of the worst lines, and I wrote it. When you came back, there's Natalie Portman holding the face of 3PO. And meantime, Don Bees had stuck the back of the head on me, and around here had put fridge magnets. I also had the lights, 3PO's eyes, on a special rig that Don had made, a bit like spectacles. So just the eyes. And Natalie, on action, had to maneuver this face.
There.
Not quite. I think about the third take, she did it. And there was 3PO, whole, as the shape of 3PO for the first time. And everybody was exquisitely happy, especially 3PO. So right from the beginning of the film, we reshot the 3PO scenes that had been puppets, and we shot them on blue screen, green screen, any screen, with a gold suit that Justin Dix had done a wonderful paint job on to make it look rusty. So here's a clue. If you ever go up to the rusty 3PO, just scratch a bit, and you see his gold skin underneath. The big difference here was that, because he always started off shiny, but there George is saying, oh, he needs to be dirted down and kind of made to look grungy and stuff. So he was always a bit grungy, a bit oil-covered, and covered indeed, not so much in oil, but in shoe polish and table wax. In the script, I really didn't have much to do. It was really concentrating on the decline and fall of my creator, Anakin Skywalker. I mean, it was tragic. Not that 3PO would ever find out, and he still doesn't know, so, you know, keep the secret.
A battle! Oh, there's been some terrible mistake. I'm programmed for etiquette, not destruction.
3PO's look is, of course, iconic. Gold. A dirty gold to begin with, and then bright, shiny gold for Episode 3. But then came a bit of a twist on this. A clever piece of scripting. 3PO suffers an accident in some kind of robot factory, and he ends up with the body of a battle droid.
I'm so confused.
And to do it, what we did was, in fact, film me in full 3PO costume, and then they animated a suit around me. I had a blaster, but again, 3PO's hands were so difficult to manipulate that they actually had to wire the gun onto me so that I could hold it like that. And I learned the fun thing. As I came towards the camera, the line was, "Die, Jedi dogs, die!"
What did I say?
I will admit, those weren't the precise words I said because I wanted to get a laugh. But what was interesting is I found that you couldn't go, "Die, Jedi dogs, die," or whatever words, without going, you've got to make the thing live for you, you know. And that was kind of exciting and totally daft, actually. 3PO has no memory of it, so it's cool.
Oh dear, I'm terribly sorry about all this.
For Revenge of the Sith, which was obviously going to be the final film, they had made the collar, the neck a little bigger so that it grated on me rather less and sort of didn't constrict my Adam's apple all day. That bit wasn't nice to wear. But in a rather softer way, they'd changed the process of the corset into a silicone which was lighter and not exactly breathable, but it was more pleasant than the thick rubber thing that I had on before. So all the time people were making little adjustments for my safety and welfare, and I'm very grateful. And you have a special standby painter who would come and daub the costume just to take the shine off it. The camera department had another trick. They go, hold your breath, Tones, and like hairspray in the face, but it was dulling spray. Because you don't want that costume to be too shiny because it reflects everything. But here I was, magnificent in shine. Eventually I would be at ILM and see somebody watching frame by frame by frame every movement that I made, and in Photoshop replacing the green with gold.
Oh, my dear friend, how I missed you.
How amazing that I had thought that after episode 6, that was it. Return of the Jedi. End. No, we had the prequels. New word for us all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was it. Wrong. Hopelessly wrong. Because, of course, the phone call, would I care to work with J.J. Abrams? He asked me, would you just like to do the voice? And I said, no, but I would like a new suit. Of course. That's JJ.
Goodness! Han Solo! It is I, C-3PO.
David Merriweather, a total genius in the special effects arts department, constructed a suit from photographs. And any material he could get, anything I could help him with. And he came up with the whole suit exploded on his computer. It was miraculous, absolutely miraculous. A lot of it was the same. New material for the middle piece, for the pants section. The amazing thing he did was to insert some pieces here and here that stopped me being snapped by the meeting of these two joints. But the big thing, this half-hour screw here, became a back, and a... After all these years, magic. After each shot, take it off. Put it back on. Take it off. Transformed my life filming. I adored working on that film. Adored it, apart from one argument, right at the beginning, with the director, with JJ.
You probably don't recognize me because of the red arm. Look who it is. Did you see who...
What's with the red arm? It shows history. You mean like the silver shin in the first film, A New Hope? Yeah, exactly. But that was too subtle to notice. Exactly. That's why it's red. I did not like the red arm, okay? I thought it was too big, too overt, too clumsy a gesture. So every day on the set, I would say to JJ, no forgiveness, ever. He would laugh.
Sorry. Come along, BB-8, quickly. Yes, I must get my proper arm reinstalled.
I so persecuted JJ on the set of The Force Awakens about the red arm. I gave him no quarter at all. And we finished, and that was it. And then I go to see the premiere. And I'm looking at this shot. Yeah, there's the Falcon now rising through special effects. And there is 3PO, waving at the Falcon, with a gold arm. JJ had given me a final gift. He changed the color in post-production. 3PO's got a gold arm back. For The Force Awakens, and indeed for The Last Jedi, 3PO was 3D printed. And of course it makes it easier to prototype because it's all on a computer and you go, it's not quite right, etc. That was fine. Still weighed a surprising amount, actually. But the pants section was made of a different material, the kind of new material that was fine, and it was paintable and it moved. Gradually it stiffened up. The material didn't react well with the atmosphere, but gradually as we got towards the end of filming, I was realizing how difficult this was, and there was nothing I could do about it. Try to fudge it, try to trick so you don't notice it so much. Of course you will now, won't you? I shouldn't have said anything, jeez. Part of the wonder of 3PO's look when he's that bright gold is that he doesn't start off that way at all. It starts off with just an ordinary plasticky looking thing, white in this case. But then they vacuum plate a silver finish onto it. So you put it in a vacuum chamber with silver foil and it sticks to it. But then the clever thing, so you've got a silver droid. So then the paint department, the art department, take various colored lacquers that cover the silver, but make it gold. And the silver gives it lift and life and brightness. But you need that. If you started with solid gold, it kind of would be a little dead. So they thought this out, and he looked magnificent. Once the red arm had gone, of course.
Scarif? They're going to Scarif? Why does nobody ever tell me anything, Artu?
What joy to be asked to be in Rogue One as 3PO. Just for one scene, walk through like Alfred Hitchcock. Who was that droid? Yes, I was there. It was the same suit, of course, but it just shone out of that very dark and forbidding set. And there was 3PO, and I did a little trick. I got fully dressed in my little tent, my easy-up tent, and when I was ready, they opened the entrance, and I walked out. Nobody knew I was going to be there. It was a huge secret that 3PO was in this shot. It was a really good moment, but it was soon over.
Well, I'm quite certain I would remember if I had a best friend.
And so we come to the rise of Skywalker, what it's all been about, where we were heading. And here was 3PO again, minus the red arm. JJ was indeed forgiven. What a brilliant film.
I wholeheartedly agree.
But there were issues with the suit. Still, the fixing was great. The arms, the hands, for the first time they made hands that actually were jointed like my own fingers. This is brilliant. It meant that if I wanted to pick something up, I could do. And that was so good in the first sequence, in the sand tunnels, with the dagger. Oh, it's one of those.
Oh, the location of the Wayfinder has been inscribed upon this dagger.
I cannot tell you what it felt like. It was total freedom. Back in the day, it would be, sorry, I would have dropped it. Here, I was clutching it, looking at it. There were other changes that were not so good. By now, the section that we know what we call it, that material really had stiffened up. It was like wearing concrete underpants. I had a wonderful part in that film. I adored being in it. But I had a lot of movement to do, a lot of running about, a lot of strange terrain.
I do not want to know what made these tunnels.
Judging by the circumference of the tunnel walls, there are
I said I do not want to know.
And so gradually, towards the end, when it became almost impossible to move in that middle section, we found ways around it. Thank goodness for ILM, because we were able to do all sorts of sequences that I couldn't do wearing the full middle of the suit. And indeed, when I was climbing up to Arch's freighter, up that rock face, that was me, but I was wearing only the, as it were, girdle part of the middle section. The rest of me, from there down, was covered in red dots. And for other sequences, it was the same. When something was impossible, we took away that bit of the costume, stuck red dots down my legs as reference for ILM, and they drew in 3PO's missing limbs. Absolute magic. First day on the Rise of Skywalker, it was awful. I was delighted to be there with the crew, and Daisy and Oscar and John, and of course, JJ. But boy, what a set. Because the sand tunnels was a very enclosed set. It had to be. It was a tunnel too. And It was very hot. It was hot because we had lamps in there, and also there was atmosphere, a bit of smoke to make the lighting look really cool, as opposed to the hotness that it was. And it was real perspiration time. And one of the magic things they'd done was to give me a little vest, very thin material, but onto it was sewn fine plastic tubes, little thin plastic tubes that circled like an underfloor heating system. Except it wasn't a heating system, it was the cooling system. And what happened at the end of a take was they would attach me to a black bag, very smart, but in it was water with lumps of ice. And in the bag, onto a tube, was a circulating fan. So it would shoot water up the tubes, down the tubes, up the tubes, all around my chest and back. It was fantastic. It was immediate. It felt like a heart attack. It was really weird. But it did keep me cool, but I could only take it for so long. Yeah, I'm cool now. I'm cool, totally cool. Disconnect me.
Babu?
Yep, DROID is ready.
For sitting there in that terrifying scene with the red eyes, sitting down in that costume is not possible. So we went for the full bikini section of that. Yes, I was wearing this amazing codpiece. The rest of the suit was cut away so I could sit down. And you don't see it. You don't expect to see it. You don't see it. Maybe if you can freeze frame and come in, zoom in, if you're that serious about it, you'll see the difference. But of course, we also had the red eyes. When I first looked in a mirror at me, 3PO, with the red eyes, I got to tell you, it was quite shocking, because he'd never been like that before. We had eyes of different intensities. Sometimes they were actually operated by radio from the electric system over here, that if I was in very bright light, ambient light, then they would need to make the eyes bright so they would sharp. If it was in a gloomy cave, for instance, they would dim the lights so they weren't too piercing. So all the time you've got a crew behind me adding to 3PO's value as a character. Quite amazing. But the teamwork that goes into making bits of 3PO work on the whole for the better, I can actually take this moment to say thank you, guys. Thank you, all of you.
Did we lose him?
Looks like it!
Excellent job, sir! Terrible job, sir!
I love remembering how Tracy Emin played C-3PO falling off Jabba's barge, and then how she played Princess Leia sweeping across to the little skiff over there. And stunt people actually are undervalued, frankly. I've wanted there to be an Academy Award for them, but it hasn't happened yet. Films like the ones we're talking about really depend on the stunt people so many times, time after time. So I was very, very glad to have a stunt person of my own. Michael Birch. He was my stunt double. But when we were talking about the wonderful speeder sequence in Jordan, in Pasana, the desert, magic. There were sequences that were shot on very fast-running vehicles. And Mike was there, being 3PO, in the distance, running at 70 miles an hour. And in case the car crashed, he was not allowed to be roped on. He had to have the ability to free fall off the vehicle. Can you imagine standing upright in a crazy rubber suit, in the wind, in the heat, and everything at 70 miles an hour, wondering if you're going to die? Whereas when I was on the real rig, which was like this wonderful fairground ride that kind of shot us around, it was brilliant fun. But there I was, wired on to various bits of the scenery, so that with a certain latitude, I couldn't go further than that. So I was totally safe. I had the best time ever.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
Taking one last look, sir, at my friends.
There we are. Thanks for listening to me talking about C-3PO. Not so much today as a character, but as a costume. And of course, as such, I'm the actor who wears something that's been created and maintained and fixed and fiddled with and cared for and loved by a whole team of people who have made this character look so good and so convincing in all the Star Wars films. And both I and 3PO are saying, really guys and gals,